Hi, welcome to Kitchen Chats. I'm your host, Amy Kandrak. This is the podcast where we come together when something major happens in life, and we sit around the kitchen and we figure out the next steps. Today's guest is my best friend, Shannon Cohen, and we're talking about a major life transition that we've both been through and had the opportunity to help each other through, and that is divorce. I hope that our conversation, insights, do's and don'ts can be helpful for you if you know someone who's also navigating this major life transition. Happy listening. Hi, I'm Amy Kandrak, and you're listening to Kitchen Chats. Today, I have my best friend and guest, Shannon Cohen, with me to discuss a major life transition that I happen to be experiencing right now, and that she's also gone through. And we're talking about divorce. And she might have to help lead the conversation because it's just really hard, especially when you're going through it. Shannon, it's not the first time you've been in my kitchen.
No.
Not going to be the last. And it's not the first time you're in my kitchen talking about divorce.
Certainly not.
But thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, there's so many things to talk about with this transition. And before it was me going through divorce, I really couldn't comprehend all of the emotions that I would feel, all of the emotions that other people would feel as I would share information. And oh my God, it's just so hard.
It really is. It's tough, and it is an immensely vulnerable time, and you can't help but be public about it. And I think it's just very difficult to transition through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't help but be public about multiple parts of it, right?
Right.
Because you have the whole, you show up somewhere and people are like, oh, where's your husband? And how do you respond, right? Depends on the second. Do I burst into tears? Do I say something snarky because I'm in a cranky mood? Do I just want to run away and hide? Do I really want to have to tell them what's going on?
Right. Sometimes you're just like, oh, not sure where he is. And move on. You don't really, it's difficult because you don't want every new interaction with people. And a lot of times it's at a party, or it's at a work event, or it's at this or that. And people will, they're just making small talk. They don't necessarily want to stumble into that either. And
Right.
So sometimes you just it's difficult because if it's a person that you're going to see with any regularity, you feel like at some point it becomes kind of like you're hiding things, to not just say, oh, we're separating. We've separated. But then sometimes you would really rather just not go into it and just be like, oh, he couldn't make it tonight, and move on, and then
Right.
Kind of address it later. I dealt with it in so many different ways, but it never felt like the right way.
It never feels like the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. And I don't know if there's been too many right ways for people to respond, but there are a few.
There are. I liked almost always the good responses came from people who had been through a divorce, because I think that because I think that they really go through, they understand what you're going through. And so, and they kind of understand that it's this weird mix of, hey, I'm sorry and congratulations. And, that's, somebody said that to me, and I was like, wow, that's kind of the perfect response, because yes, I'm really sorry you're going through this, but congratulations, you get to move on and figure out the next right thing in your life. And this can be a great turning point for you, but it is very difficult to go through right now. And it kind of sucks for the time being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there are different days when that resonates more with me than others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are some days when congratulations feels like the absolute worst.
Right.
Right? Like, this is not what I wanted. It's not how I envisioned my life. On the other hand, there's no other option other than trying to find
Right.
the good through it.
You just have to move through and figure out the good part of it, because and that's, so I got divorced 2015 was when he moved out. So, it's been a long time now, and my kids were little. They were 7 and 10. And it was the holidays, and my youngest was getting ready to have a birthday. So, it was kind of like it felt very emotional then, and it felt completely overwhelming at the moment.
Uh-huh.
But now I'm 8 years down the road, and I'm in a different spot, and I have a whole different perspective on it, but I can still look back and remember how I felt when I was where you are right now. And I didn't appreciate how much grief is involved in a divorce. Like, I just didn't appreciate that from other people who had gone through it.
I think the grief was the most unexpected emotion that I got.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I had quite a few people who immediately were like, oh, if you want to be angry, come and let's, do something to really get all of that anger out. And I wasn't at that moment, right? Mm-hmm. And I was sad, I was hurt, I was rejected. And all of this to say, like, while it was surprising in the moment, divorce doesn't just happen, usually.
Right.
Right? Like, this wasn't a huge surprise to many people.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, like, I didn't really think it was happening, but it's still, the grief was so overwhelming. And a friend said something to me that kind of helped me reframe the grief, which was, it's actually just reframing and repicturing how you had a picture of the rest of your life.
Right.
And I think that's what I was grieving also.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of other parts of it that I was grieving, clearly, but the, like, oh my gosh, what is, like, all these plans that we had for our future.
I think for me, that was the biggest part of the grief for me. Was I was just getting ready to turn 40. I had a vision of what was going to happen. We were going to go to Mexico the next week or the next month, right? And mm-hmm. Suddenly, it's little things. It's the immediate plans that you had made, but it's also the long-term plans. And it's right. How does this change my relationship with my kids? And how does this change their life? And I've got to grieve, like, their childhood, And so it's difficult. I think it's the reframing and kind of the shifting your perception of what your future was going to look like that really you just have to work through.
Yeah. And I know that I will get there. And some days I am, but it's I didn't expect it. Okay?
Yeah.
So I was your friend through your divorce and have so many regrets now of things that I didn't do and could have done differently because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right. And I think, like, when you're in the midst of your divorce, you are just hanging on for survival, right? Like, yes. You are so inwardly focused, not in a selfish way or anything. It is just sheer survival. And so, I think friends from the outside are like, oh, I wish I'd done this or I wish I'd done that. And honestly, I thought you were a great friend through my divorce. And it's nice just to have people reach out to you and touch base every so often. But also, you've got so much to process that you just kind of, and obviously, I'm a person who likes my alone time, but you've got so much to process that some of it you just have to do on your own, And I think being a good friend through a divorce is really just kind of being there and available when the person is ready. But there's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do. I think the best things so far have been the people who have said, they just check in regularly. Right? Just, how are you today? And the ones who can be really flexible with me.
Right.
I have spent more time alone in the past 3 months than I think I ever have in my adult life. And because I just haven't had emotional or social capacity.
Right.
To be in public, to have to tell people what's going on. The kids have just moved out, so I'm alone for that also. But to your point, there's just so much processing.
Right.
And the survival mode of it is just, I just feel raw sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And everything is just harder. Like you had your system going, you had your schedule going, you had the things that you did, you had the things that he did, I know that you were on your own a lot as it was anyway. However, all of a sudden, and it's just you, and there is nothing, you can't put it off till, somebody gets home, because that's not going to happen. And,
right.
Taking the trash out or mowing the lawn or cooking while you're somebody fixing dinner while you're grabbing the kids from school, it's all of those things just suddenly feel just completely overwhelming, because you have to restructure your entire life, and suddenly you're doing it all on your own all the time for the foreseeable future.
And you're just emotionally drained.
Right.
The other night, I had a little bit of a shit, I didn't mean to do it like this as a parent. I've been lucky in the sense that the kids have been gone while I've been going through this. And this divorce isn't about them in any way whatsoever.
Right.
And I don't want them to have to be in the middle of this. And I don't want to say anything bad about their dad, because he's a great dad. But I got an email from an attorney as we were making dinner. And I just kind of started crying, and I could feel the emotions. And I don't even remember what I said, but I was just really cranky, really upset. I could feel the emotion, and said something to the, and Claire was here while I was fixing dinner. And I was like, oh God, I'm sorry. I didn't want to bring you into this. And you had your kids with you when they were really little.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did that.
Well, I was just sitting here processing while you were talking, and in some ways that's hard, because you have to be, you just have to put it to the side. But also, when they were there, I had to focus on them, and I couldn't kind of go down the rabbit hole, and I couldn't, I was getting dinner. I was, we were surviving, and we were doing it as a group, and it was all okay. But I didn't have that mental time to process that you've probably had to deal with a little bit, when they were gone, when they were at their dad's house for their days, then I would kind of go down into that hole. But there's probably some advantage to being forced to not be able to deal with it all the time.
Well, I mean, whatever quote unquote advantages there are as someone is going through this, I think you can weigh it either way.
Yeah.
Other good things that people have done for me, though, again, just the being available at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
When I do spiral, or when I am you know what, it's 5:30, I haven't eaten all day, I've been by myself working, and processing different things and trying to get the house to sell and all these other things that I'm doing, I feel like I could use some human interaction.
Right.
And the people who are like, yeah, sure, let's go grab some pizza.
Yeah.
Has been really, really great. And you've done that more than once. So thank you.
Happy to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the things that people did that were very helpful to me. One friend kind of knew the days that the kids would transfer over to his house. And so at that point, it was kind of nice. She just kind of just touch base on those days. And she never made it a thing. It was never like, but, pretty quickly I figured out her pattern of just being like, hey, how you doing? And, it was always when she knew that the kids were going. And so then another friend of mine that did go through a divorce and had a very young child, I just kind of had a reminder on my phone. And on those days that I knew that, her baby was going to dad's house, I would just reach out to her. And I completely stole that idea from someone else because it's just kind of
that's a huge
being
one.
seen, right? Like knowing that you're going through this thing that's very hard and it happens every single week and it never gets easier. However, you've got somebody that's just kind of touching base, just being present. And I think that was really considerate and very helpful.
That is an amazing idea. I really love that. And I think that the unobtrusive touch base is what has been so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I have stayed really, really insular with this. Like I said, I haven't told people very much. I've really not been social because I didn't want to have to tell anybody. I didn't want to have to talk about it because I didn't know if I would break down in tears, right?
Right.
And I was also scared about reactions, which I mentioned at the beginning, because a couple of times I got a little gun shy because I did share, and the response, I was just so upset. And I know that the people were not intending to cause me to be more upset, but the questions, like, oh my God, I had no idea. Well, no, because I just told you, and I'm glad that this hasn't been gossiped everywhere.
Right.
On the other hand, there are some people who I'm like, I know these people know because they've been told and they haven't reached out. And that's another weird where I'm like, well, I guess it's probably fine, but kind of strange also.
Yeah, I think that one's tough because I tend to err on the side of not reaching out unless the person themselves has told me, because I'm kind of like, well, I'll just give them their privacy and let them kind of process it. And when I see them, I'll talk with them and reach out. But having gone through a few major life events, it really is nice when people reach out, even the people that you don't expect. And so I'm trying to put that into practice a little bit better because it is weird. It's awkward. However, this isn't something that's not going to be known. People are going to find out. So you might as well reach out when you find out. Well, say something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I don't know that there's a right or wrong with that one. And it really is based on the relationship you have with somebody.
Absolutely.
But some of those people also who were like, I had no idea. What happened? Okay, you and I have talked about this on multiple occasions lately. Yes. What happened? Have you ever been in a fight with someone you love?
Right.
And let me just tell you the worst of it. No, I'm not telling you what happened.
Yeah. Why don't you take a minute and think about the worst day you've had with your partner and tell me all about that, and then we can transition into my worst day. How about that? Does that sound good?
Right.
And we have talked about this, and it is, I understand the urge that, people have to want to know. And after my divorce, I did kind of try to make a commitment to myself that I'm never going to ask, and I won't gossip about people's divorces because it's just, you don't know. It is incredibly personal, and it's just none of my business. I just need to butt out and let them process through it. If you haven't told me, if I don't know, then I don't need to know.
Then I don't need to
Right.
know. And if I'm not bringing up and coming to vent all of this to you, then I don't feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
And if I am, and I'm only telling you bad things about him, then I'm probably denying anything that I did, because I can't imagine, I don't know this, but I'm pretty confident that most divorces are two-sided. I'm very hurt with mine, right? So I'm not saying that it doesn't hurt. But relationships generally, not always, okay?
Not always.
However,
in most divorces, yeah, I mean that.
do I really want to tell you the bad things that I did to make this happen? No.
Right. I'm still ignoring those. Thank you very
Yes,
much. So
please.
let's talk about that a different day. Yeah, and I had a really amicable divorce. My ex and I get along. We co-parent well together. It's, as far as vitriol goes, we didn't have a lot of it. And I feel incredibly fortunate for that, because I do see people who go through really nasty, ugly divorces.
Yes.
And I have the luxury of not having had to deal with that. And so, I get it. Sometimes you just want to complain and you just want to vent. And if the person who's going through the divorce wants to do that, I am all for that. However, if you're not volunteering the information to me, I'm not going to ask, because wow, that's a really hard thing to talk about. And it takes you as the person getting divorced to a place that you don't really want to go to every day. Like, I don't really want to have to dig into why my relationship failed every single day when I'm talking to people. Just
because I'm
give
pretty
me some
sure
space.
I'm pretty sure I'm processing that right now anyway.
Right.
Like, there's a lot going on, and yeah, that's not, if you're not sitting in the kitchen with me and
Right.
seeing everything that's gone on for the past 26 years that's led up to this, then you probably don't need to know.
Right.
But you can support me. You can support him if you're
Absolutely.
friends with him too.
Yeah. Reach out, be a human being. A very small drop of kindness goes a long way in so many different circumstances, but even in this one. And I think that people kind of discount and don't necessarily understand that it really is just kind of earth-shattering to get divorced, and you're going through a lot, and you don't have the emotional capacity to talk about what happened, and you don't have the emotional capacity to, tell people all the time. Like, I cried every single time I told people for like 2 months. It was ridiculous. I couldn't get the words out.
Right.
And so then, once I was ready for people to know, I was just like, okay, you can tell people, and kind of letting other people pass the word, because it was just completely exhausting. I had told the people who I needed to tell personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, people can hear. It's fine. I don't need to be the one that tells everyone, and I can't be, because it's just too much.
I think that's a really good point. And I'm almost at that spot where I'm like, please don't make me share the information one more time.
Right. Can you just
yeah, this is what it is, right? But so we're recording this right in the middle of the holiday season, and I'm actually invited to a holiday party tonight, and I just don't know that I can go. And I was trying to explain this to someone earlier today who was really encouraging me to go. Because I'm usually, yes, I want to go to every party. I want to say hi to everybody. Like, I love a good quick party. I like people. And some parties I've been able to go to because I don't have to answer the question for real when someone says, how are you?
Right.
Which is kind of the question that I dread more than anything at all right now. Because for people who don't need to know what is really going on with me, I can be like, there are good days and bad days, and that's enough, and they don't need to get into it. But for the people who it would be awkward for me not to, we started this in the beginning of the conversation, but I don't want to be a Debbie Downer in the middle of a party.
Right.
Right? This is supposed to be fun. And I know people care about me and want to, support me, but I also don't want to be like, oh, hey, let me drop everything that just happened to me.
Right.
Because it's kind of a bomb right now.
Kind of got a lot going on.
So I think that's something that's hard to navigate, and the question that I hate the most. And the first time I said yes to going to someone's house for dinner, it was my son's girlfriend's family invited me over for dinner. And they're just so kind. And about 10 minutes before we were ready to go, I said to Elliot, can you please ask them one small thing? And that is, just don't ask me how I am. Yeah. Like, it's just such a knee jerk. Like, oh, hi, how are you? And none of them did. And it made the entire interaction so much better.
Right. You don't have to dread.
Because they know what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
Right? They know I'm a mess.
They know. Exactly. I think that's the other important thing is like figuring out your triggers and then taking action to avoid them.
Yes.
Which is, again, a vulnerable thing that you have to do. But just being like, don't ask me how I am.
Yeah.
I think I got to the point I was like, oh, don't ask me that.
Don't ask.
Don't ask. Let's not go into that.
Don't ask because I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of other things people can do. I've been noticing and remembering advice that I would give other people when they're going through any other major life event. What are your gifts that you can offer to someone? Mm-hmm. And going through divorce, it's the same time. A friend's husband knew what was going on and saw me and said, I'm a financial planner. And I just want to make sure that if you have any questions, you can call me.
Which is perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So remembering, what are your gifts as the friend? Mm-hmm. What are the ways that you would support someone going through any other thing when it seems normal to reach out, right?
Right.
Divorce is one that I don't even mention very much. Like What Friends Do website doesn't have that as one of our boxes where we normally provide support pages for people, sure, right? Looking at what those things are that you can do for someone.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I think that people don't always put it in that major life event category of right. This is something that you may need community support on. Right. I think that people view it as, I won't say there's still a stigma around divorce, but I will say that, people are kind of like, well, that's something that couple is going through. And I don't think you typically get a whole lot of community support. And it's major. It is kind of life-altering, It's very life-altering. And
It's really, really life-altering. I said something I regretted to a friend, and I'm going to share it because she has been grieving the loss of her wife. Mm. And it was right before the holidays, and she's still grieving the loss of her wife. And I was in a feisty mood, and I said, yes, this is grief also, but at least she didn't choose not to be with you. Such a bitch for me to say that. Oh my God. Right? What the hell was I thinking? I should not have said that. On the other hand, we're both grieving the loss of the person.
Yeah. You're sitting there and you're alone, and there was nothing you could do to change that.
And there's nothing I could do to change that. And there's nothing she could do to change that. And she's one that has loved me long enough that she wasn't, I don't think, too offended, but
yeah, I think that was a case where your hurt kind of just stepped in and made you say something that you wouldn't have normally said. But that sentiment of like feeling like, oh, here I am. I thought this marriage was my marriage and it was going to last forever, and it didn't. And what's wrong with me? I think right. That's just a really natural feeling. And
what's wrong with me? And yes, we're both like, now we're both single women
Right.
without a spouse and feeling very similar in the aloneness, just for different reasons. But again, you get support differently.
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that the support that you can give people who are going through divorce, maybe it does look different. But also, I think that it's important to recognize that that is something that people do need. They do need that support that would look a lot like having a death in the family, or having a sick child, or having, whatever it might be.
Right. And I know you and I have talked about this, but I want to bring it up again because your kids were little.
They were.
And my kids are both, technically adults, baby adults, off in college. So the support that they needed as we're going through this is very different than the support that your kids needed.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much that friends and parents of kids' friends can do. And we talked about this the last time you were on our podcast, on the podcast, but I want to bring it up again because I think there's, in this context, it feels different for some reason.
Yeah.
The things of reminding the kid, you can always just come over to my house after whatever. Like if you need to be at my house after practice, no problem. No questions asked. You're welcome to just be here. Because they're going through this too.
Absolutely. And it's hard for them because, it's happening to them.
It is.
It's very much, they have no agency at all. Like,
none. Sometimes
as a married person getting divorced, you feel like you have no agency in it. And then you look at your kids and you're like, oh yeah, they really have no agency in this. And it's hard.
And it's really hard. And their parents sometimes are making crappy comments in the middle of dinner like I did the other night. And when you're really little, that's so hard.
Yeah, my mistake I made with my youngest is I was determined to kind of like be super positive, and you're going to dad's house. This is great. Okay, go to dad's house. Time to go to dad's house. And he was upset one night, and he's laying there and he's like, well, it just feels like you don't even want me here. You're just sending me off to dad's house and you're happy about it. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh. and so that kind of taught me with my kids. And I thought of this when you were talking about your dinner breakdown. I don't think it's all bad to let them see that you are struggling a little bit sometimes, because I think that it helps them kind of feel justified in their feelings too. And I think that it works differently with older and younger kids. But, with him, he was upset, and he felt like I was, what did he say? You're just booting me over to the other house. And I was like, okay, a little dramatic.
Look, I've said some dramatic things too.
But yeah, I was like, no, I would keep you here every single minute if I could. However, I want you to have a relationship with your dad too. And that's important to me and important to him. And so to do that, you need to spend time over there. And, we have been 50-50, like straight 50-50 with time with the kids. And so I didn't take that minute to explain to him, to say, I would love to have you here every single minute, but I can't. And that's not fair to you. It's not fair to dad. This is the right thing, but that doesn't make it any easier for me. And I was trying to be positive to let you go without guilt. But that's not how I feel at all. I don't want to be happy about sending you away, but, I was trying to do it to help you out. And so, I showed him a little more of those feelings. And I think it helped him, because I think it made him kind of understand that I was going through something too. And it wasn't just no big deal to me. It was hard for me, and it was a real challenge, but it was important for these reasons. And I think that helped.
Yeah. I think finding that balance for the kids of how much do they see hurt, frustration, anger, sadness, maybe happiness.
Sometimes happiness, yeah.
Because some minutes I'm like, well, you know what? Came downstairs, my kitchen was clean.
Exactly.
That's pretty nice. We didn't fight about leaving the dishwasher open this time.
Perfect.
That was lovely.
Yeah.
But how much of that do you share with the kids? But making sure that they have space of their own.
Yes.
To process all of this, because it really is happening to them. And that's something that I know you and I have both done.
Yeah.
And I did it for your kiddo. I've done it for some other kiddos also. And just, you know what? If you're here for the weekend,
that's okay.
That's okay. Maybe just not having to be unsure of what next emotion is going to come out.
Absolutely.
At your house.
Yeah.
Because there's just such a roller coaster.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to be someplace that's neutral, someplace that's away. Right. You just want to hang out with your friends and be a kid.
And picking up the slack for people who are going through this.
Right.
The parents who are, you know, it's the same stuff. Again, if there was a death in the family or someone's in the hospital or there's, you know, some other major life event and they're always late for picking kids up and they're always, you know, just a little bit frazzled and their kids always just forget. Like, showing grace around divorce is something that I didn't do well enough before.
Well, I would disagree with that. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think that is a great concrete example of things to do. You know, understand that you may need to drop the kid off at a different house than usual that day. Yeah. And it's completely unplanned and it throws your carpool completely off. However, yeah, we can take you to dad's house. That's fine. Or,
you need to go to both houses because your cleats are at one house and you're at the other house. And
we have played that game many, many times of stuff's at dad's house. Okay, go over there. So we couldn't
keep track of where our cleats were in one house.
It was a challenge. But yeah, sometimes it's like, all right, I have time to get you over to dad's house to get your stuff, but I don't have time to get you back. So they're just going to have to pick you up there. And having a person who's flexible and can change and take that on is great. Mm-hmm. I think that's one great concrete example. The concrete example of having a safe space, not even a safe space, but just like a neutral space that they can come to that, you know, is away from the chaos and the difference and the, you know, whatever it might be. For my kids, they were young, so it was a little less about, I think, getting support from their peers at the moment. I think they got some support from their peers, but they were a little on the young side for that.
Yeah.
But I think where your kids are now, you know, if you're a parent who has a kid who's connected with that kid, maybe gently suggest to your kid, hey, reach out to them. They're probably having a hard time and they probably might want to have somebody to talk to about this. And they're probably not feeling super comfortable with just flagging people down and asking. So maybe reach out and, you know, be mindful of that.
I think that is a big one, especially for, because for kids, you don't want to necessarily, like every kid's different. Every kid's relationship with their friends is different. But it's for them the same thing that it is for us going through it. Oh, hey, what's going on? Oh, my mom and dad are getting divorced. Shit, I don't know what to say as you know, like, I don't know what to say going through it. I don't think I've said the right thing to people before. There's no way that kids necessarily know the right thing to say. Sometimes they do because they're actually far more emotionally perceptive in things.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
But just that reach out to say, hey, why don't you
touch base with this person?
Mm-hmm. And with a reminder, and I did this with my kids a few times too. I was like, you know, their house might be a little more chaotic than usual.
Right.
Like, they've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
Showing them grace through that is helpful.
Absolutely.
And that as the parent, that's your reminder to your kid to try and teach them through this.
Yeah. Extending grace to people when they need it, because sometimes it's going to be you that needs it.
Yeah.
I will say this is a don't for me. One of how are you doing comment was, oh, well, think about everything you're going to get done when you don't have your kids. On the weekends you don't have your kids. And I was like, yeah, that's not really great for me. You know, I would take my kids, like I said, I would have them all the time. This is not a bonus that I have kid-free weekends. And that is a comment that I got probably
gosh.
almost as often as what happened. It was like, oh, think of all the things, think of all your free time without kids. And I understand the impulse where it comes from, but for me, it was kind of like taking the absolute most painful part of this and trying to spin it into something that's good. And it was just not something that I could hear very well and take in very well. And it always got me defensive. And so that would be my don't in relation to kids and divorce.
Gosh, I'm really afraid that I've said something like that to people in the past.
I think it's pretty natural, right? It's a nice, light, fluffy thing to say. And maybe other people who are going through a divorce it doesn't hit them as hard as it hit me. But for me, that was definitely a question of, oh yeah, let's not talk about all the things I'll get done while I don't have my kids, because I'd really rather just have them and get less done.
Yeah.
And, there are weird things that happen with your schedule where you really are trying to get a lot done on the times where you don't have your kids. And so it also just kind of feels like salt in the wound of, hey, I don't have my kids. And really, I don't have the extra time that you think I have. So.
Right. Well, and because when I do have my kids, I don't have anybody else helping.
Right.
So I am doing a lot of stuff. Or when I don't have my kids right away, maybe I'm calling lawyers and I'm retitling things and I'm doing all of this paperwork and not fun things.
Right. This is not enjoyable time.
This is not an enjoyable time. Mm-hmm. And I'm missing things because I'm not the parent that's with them for the weekend.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really big one.
Yeah, that one's hard.
That one's really hard. And I've not yet experienced this. Because my relationship was one that I did a lot of things on my own anyway. Mm-hmm. But I know something that my mom experienced a lot after my dad died, and I can imagine happens to a lot of people when they're divorced, is you don't get invited the same way to different things.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah, I have experienced that one. And, people say, oh, well, it was a couples thing, or it was this or that. And I would say, if you are at all capable of not doing that to people, don't. Because, I don't need to have, it can be a couples dinner and I know you just fine, and just invite me. It's
right.
Or make sure that everything you do isn't a couples thing or whatever. It's hard and it hurts.
Yeah. I know it was really, really hard for my mom. Mm-hmm. To not be included in things because they were couples things. I always wanted you to come when we would invite you to things, but it would also just be like, I don't know, I'm not that far along yet. And again, I went to so many things on my own anyway.
Right.
So for me, I don't know. I think that's going to be one that I hope people just think about.
I think that is an excellent point. And I think it happens kind of unconsciously. And and you're already feeling kind of socially adrift, and you don't know where you fit. And then to kind of feel like people are out doing things in a social setting and you didn't get invited and it doesn't get talked about in front of you, but specifically because it's a couples thing, kind of just feels extra insulting.
Yeah.
And hurtful.
Mm-hmm. I know it was a little hard for me when you were getting divorced, because my husband and your husband were really good friends.
Right.
And navigating who do we invite.
Right. And that part, I guess I should correct it and say you don't have to invite the newly single person to every single thing. And sometimes it's just easier to only invite one or the other, or to invite neither. That's hard. And I think people oftentimes feel kind of stuck in the middle if you were friends with the group as a couple.
For us, it naturally figured its way out.
It did.
Right. So we weren't necessarily, that's not a great example. I think for a lot of people, that's a hard one. Like, who gets which friend?
I think that happens a lot. And I think a lot of times it happens that you just get neither as the friend.
Yeah.
And I understand that, that happens. It changes the dynamic, and sometimes your friendships are going to change. But if you're able to continue inviting and it works out, don't not invite the person just because they would be a single.
Right.
Because I think that they can probably navigate that a little bit better than you might think.
And just because they say no at first
Right.
doesn't mean that they're always going to say no.
Exactly.
You know, like at first I'm in a probably no a lot of the times.
Yeah.
But as I move through it, as the firsts of things pass, I think that will all change, right?
Yeah. I think you kind of have to figure out who you are and then go back and you can start re-engaging in the things that you do and you enjoy doing and reestablish some of those friendships.
Yeah. Shannon, this was really hard for me. But thank you for being here with me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks for always sitting with me. So as we close, I have 2 questions for you. And I think you've already kind of answered these. But when you were going through divorce, what was the best thing that anyone did for you?
I think that would be just reaching out. The best thing, I really did appreciate that friend who figured out the day that my kids left and just touched base on those days. And then also the friends who understood, who gracefully accepted all of my no's and kept inviting me to things and kept me kind of socially engaged.
Yeah. And then the final question is, what is the one thing that you try to always do for someone as they're going through divorce? Your favorite tip or thing?
That one
Again,
would be the
same,
reaching out.
yeah.
That's the thing that I have taken and just try to reach out with some frequency to a person who's going through divorce because you understand how lonely it can be.
Yeah. Thanks for being my friend, Shannon.
Thanks for being mine.
Kitchen Chats is brought to you by What Friends Do and co-produced by Amy Kandrak and Songbird Media Group. Never miss a conversation by subscribing to Kitchen Chats with Amy Kandrak on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Like us, rate us, share us with a friend. You can find more resources for those kitchen moments in your life by going to whatfriendsdo.com and following What Friends Do on your favorite social media platforms.